Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto Manga chapter review. This one's going to be for chapter 31, which is called Monster. And it's fair to say about this chapter that it was definitely not one of the best chapters we've ever had. It probably ends up being slightly on the weaker end of things just because while it's a fight chapter, and because of that not a lot of plot is going to happen, I still didn't feel that the fight itself was anything particularly interesting because of the approach that they took. And because of how the pacing is done in this as like a monthly manga, but it has like the pacing like it kind of should be a weekly manga, and that this doesn't feel like 4 chapters of a fight. Because like there's basically nothing to discuss in this chapter because it's just like, okay, Delta comes in, she and Naruto square off, it seems somewhat even, they power up a little bit, Delta gets the advantage and seemingly like really badly injures Naruto. He tries to get information out of her, she sees through it, they both power up to a higher level and are about to basically go at each other, and that's the entire chapter. There's no real character takeaway. I don't think there's really all that much of a takeaway in terms of like power level beyond the fact that they were trying to get across that, obviously from the title of the chapter, both Naruto and her are kind of monsters because Naruto has Kurama in him and that gives him a lot of kind of crazy powers, and then she is a kind of ninja tool person and has all these kind of crazy ninja tool aspects to her. She has basically the Kawaki power in her legs, she has kind of special eyes that can absorb jutsu, and that's fine. It was definitely, a chapter to sort of get across that, Delta is more powerful than you think. She is one of the, inners in Kara. She's one of the kind of higher ups, not the most higher up, but one of the higher ups in Kara. Of course, it's not going to be a simple one-shot type chapter because that barely ever happens, and it's in a shonen manga it's never really the best thing to do. I think for effect at times there is some value in doing it in specific circumstances. The first, I suppose, real fight against a Kara member, it wasn't really the time to do that, but I still think that ultimately Naruto should be able to win this fight, that it should be a case of Jigen should be the threat to Naruto, and he should have enough power and skill to defeat her. Ultimately, for plot reasons, I don't think that will necessarily happen, at least right now. I think what they're going to do in the next chapter or two is going to be that Kashin Koji will come in and interrupt the fight. I think they'll probably do it by Naruto being about to defeat Delta, and he'll come in and either distract Naruto in some way, like by either joining the fight and it being 2-on-1 and that being too much for Naruto, or maybe him realizing that Naruto is too powerful to take out right now, and maybe the reveal of who he is, because he's apparently someone from the Leaf Village, that will be a shock to Naruto, and that will be enough to sort of distract Naruto for Delta and Kashin Koji to escape. I'm still unclear about, like, with regards to the overall plot of, like, will they take Kawaki back at this point in time, or will he stay? I think based on the setup for that, like, we're always looking to, like, the first chapter and the fact that we know that Kawaki eventually becomes the villain, but it seems like it's a villain after a sort of betrayal of friendship, and I think we still have to have more time with Boruto and Kawaki before we get to that point, and it maybe is a little early to full-on have the, Kawaki was here for a while, had a good connection, and then becomes a villain. There still needs to be, I think, a deeper connection between Boruto and Kawaki before that makes sense, I think, to happen, and it'd be such a notable thing that they'd set it up so far in advance. Will they do a whole, like, retrieval mission to have to get Kawaki back if he is taken away? I'm not entirely sure. That's where I think it's kind of more interesting than just the direct result of any of this fight that's happening here. Like I said, like even in the choreography of this fight, while we got some pretty cool kind of hand-to-hand combat, in terms of like jutsu and stuff like that, we didn't really see anything all that fancy. Naruto used, I think, a standard Rasengan. He used, I think, like he initially led with, like, I think Kurama chakra mode, because he didn't have anything up with his eyes, so he was just a kind of simple Kurama power up. Then he went to the 6 paths sage mode or chakra mode, which is one of his more powerful ones. But I think the problem there is that, again, he's not using jutsu, he's not really using shadow clones at all. So he's clearly holding back just because it's Naruto. While he can use other jutsu now that he's older and more mature, Shadow Clones is still going to be his go-to, and because of how powerful his Shadow Clones are, like, that should be a turning point in the fight if he has to use that. So I'm not like worried that like Naruto's going to lose this fight or anything like that. It's just, I think the discussion of this chapter is kind of in a way too much like. I've seen a lot of discussion about like, oh, power levels and stuff like that, but I honestly feel like you can't really get that much of a sense for it from this, because like, okay, Delta is powerful, but like basically every character that they've gone up against has had the jutsu absorbing power, and it basically sort of means that like, oh wow, like any actual ninjutsu is just immediately negated, and it's like so many interesting attacks are suddenly useless against characters who have this ability, and it's like the only counter that they seem to have. And while it sort of makes sense that you're making this like a key trait of the main villain organization, that they counter ninjas directly, because we've already seen it so much from characters who aren't even part of Kara, it gets to be a little frustrating. I get there's more plot to it because like it's part of like the karma mark power as well, and Kara at a base level, like their leader kind of has a karma mark and so on. And the whole scientific ninja tool aspect of like how much they're modifying their bodies is interesting, especially when they, I suppose, eventually get around to revealing like, where did this all come from? What's the goal of everything here? We still need to learn a lot more about Kara, and ultimately this chapter didn't really do all that much outside of just the inners are powerful, which we knew just by them saying that. That you didn't need to, I think, spend that much time in this chapter to get across that Delta is more powerful than we think. Because even the people who are saying that Naruto should just like one-shot Delta, it shouldn't be a problem, the writing of the power levels is all over the place, you don't need to waste a whole chapter like convincing them or anything. Just just have the fight. And especially because there was a plot point within this chapter of Naruto purposefully getting himself injured to act like he's dying to potentially get information out of her. It's just like, it almost like negates the kind of cleverness. I know he can heal himself, but like still, like, do you have to get yourself stabbed? And against someone whose power you don't actually know, you're willing to accept getting stabbed. It just feels like, okay, like Naruto at times isn't the most intelligent character, but like could you not just have like been on the defensive? Like, did you have to get stabbed to determine all of this? Like, it just felt a little. It felt a little forced in terms of like, just like I said, 40 pages here. I suppose it's more equivalent to like, this is probably like the equivalent of like 3 weekly chapters. Still didn't feel like a lot happened, and because of that, there's just not a lot to discuss here. Like, it's really, this whole chapter was about Naruto and Delta. Like, you see a little bit of Boruto, a little bit of Himawari, a little bit of Kawaki, but they're just there in the sidelines watching this fight take place. Kawaki gives some minor explanation of like, these guys are super powerful, you know, basically giving the explanation because Delta's not going to be the one to directly explain things. And that's fine, it's just, there's no real takeaway, and we waited a whole month for this chapter, and it felt like, ultimately, what we were waiting for is probably what's going to happen in next month's chapter, and this one was just a kind of filler in between. That this might end up being one of the more skippable chapters if you're ever kind of going back to reread Boruto. Just like, oh yeah, here's that chapter where they established that Delta's actually powerful, even though they already told us she was powerful. Like, okay, so. That's the thing with this. Like, I don't think this is a terrible chapter by any means, but it's one that really amplifies, I think, just in general, a lot of the kind of pacing problems because of the monthly format. And this chapter is one of the most egregious examples of that, of just, like, I read this chapter in probably, like, 2-3 minutes. Like, there's just so little, like, actual substance to it. And like I said, I didn't think the choreography or moves that the characters used was anything particularly amazing as well. So it just led to a chapter feeling just a little empty. Like, there just was very little substance to it. So I think they could have absolutely increased the pace on this if they really, really wanted to. So I'm hoping that the next chapter is a huge improvement, but this one definitely kind of leaves me in this sort of low spot on the series. There's been these type of chapters before, and it's gone back up, and I'm sure it will get back to that point as well. Like, I'm not going to use this as a real heavy signifier that the manga is bad or anything like that. This just ends up being a weak chapter in the context of when it came out. We were hyped for this, and we didn't really get much of that hype in this chapter. So that's my thoughts on Boruto chapter 31. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.